have, no, that's the field, so that's gonna be 50% of that stuff. Yes. Well, look, we do not have an indicator for okra. That's why I have to put that there. Okay, see, it did for the scientific name, it filled it in there, and look at that, it doesn't matter, doesn't care that it's in the descending order. So we answered that one. And I think part of that, part of the reason for that concept of descending order was to get people thinking in the terms of dominance, right? And if you're going to automate a form that just kind of figures them out for you, it doesn't really need to be in any order. So yay for that. Yes?
So the common names are just there for reference and you still want to use the scientific?
Yes, because at the top of the form it says use scientific names. Absolutely. Yes, so that was a good question. Everybody hear that? Still use the scientific names, even though you can search by common name because that's how you know it. Use the scientific name, and it would be above the common name. Okay? Who was first? You're in the back, way back. Sorry.
So I played around with the bus form. The Detroit district has it on their website.
Oh yeah, cool.
And if you select a common name,
Yep.
and you go with it, automatically it gives you an indicator status that lets you continue on.
Right.
That would be something if it's preferred. It's nice that you can search for it, but like maybe it won't let you actually select it.
Right.
So I can see a lot of people who are just using common names. I know a lot of people who do, and they have to pay attention that it doesn't give you an indicator status. You can fill in the rest of the stuff, and it continues to
Exactly.
the percentages.
I like
Or
that.
some error message or something to let you know.
Right, right. That would be another place for an error message, just to kind of catch you to make sure that you are looking at that and pulling scientific name and make it okay, good, excellent. Do we want to try anything else on veg? What do we want to try to do with veg?
One question.
Yep.
The stratum plot size, I would think that should error out or give you a warning you didn't fill it in.
You didn't
'cause
fill it
I see
out.
that all the time with
Right.
people
Right.
do that.
Okay. I like hearing that too, because yes, I look at it, I want to know. I even made a point in my presentation about plot sizes. So right, why wouldn't they have that there? Okay, so hold on, we had, Kelly had one too.
You started with okra and it didn't give you an indicator status.
Right.
Can you enter the indicator status, especially on your upland data sheets? You may have.
Well, but I did, this is the scientific name.
Oh,
So right above, that's why I said, so right above the common name is the scientific name, so you should get it. But that's still a good question.
Species that are upland but not listed, can you fill that in on, or is it an error?
Yes.
Can you
Well, I think she had said earlier it's combining the USDA database, so a lot of the upland species are now in there.
They should be in there, but they might not be.
But they may
Right.
not have an indicator status.
Right,
So
right,
you'll have to fill that in.
exactly.
Can you override or change it? I'm thinking of like population ladies, depending on what part of north central, northeastern, are you able to just manually change that? Or?
Yes, you can change it, well, let's try it. So like for Phalaris, I know that's not one of the ones. It won't let you. Okay, so if it has an indicator status, and that's why, that's why we need to indicate on the summary form where you are, because it already will account for where you are in the country. It's where the indicator status. So, but that's a good question. So here, the only reason I could input okra was because it was common name and we didn't have an indicator status for it. But let's go back to, let's just see, if you go to its scientific name, and it already had, that was its indicator status. Now let's just say, okay, so we do a drop-down list. Now I want to say that it's actually obligate. Well, you can change it. I guess if you really wanted to mess with it, and mess with me when it comes to my desk, that'd be really interesting. Okay, so, and that's the thing, it's, again, it's a great tool, because it has a lot of information right on the sheet that you need, but yeah, you can still be human and mess it up, like we do, so many things. And I think it's just going to be very, overall, still a better system. So let's see, was there anything you wanted to try to break on hydrology? You think about anything? One thing I was seeing actually is like, okay, so yes, we have surface water. I noted that we had surface water at, it's 6 inches of surface water. Okay, it did populate it. When I tried it, oh no, it's not on, oh, I'm sorry, that's not on your screen. I figured this out yesterday. I'm due for a new computer sometime soon. Hold on. This will work better. No. That's a little better. Okay. I'll go back. Okay. All right. So now you can. Okay. Now you can see it, and so you see it populates it. So we have hydrophytic vegetation. We don't have soil yet. What do we want to try? Multiple matrix colors. Why aren't you giving me the same view? Come on. All right. So 0 to 10 inches. Give me a color. 10 wire 2 1. Okay, that sounds great. Great. So that's one matrix color. Error. What did I do wrong? Oh, I have a J. That's not correct. Okay, I'm going to retry. Thank you. See? There we go. All right. Another color that we might see. Let's see. 2.5. Oops. 0.5. What else? 2. Okay. Say that this one is 40%, 60%. Let's say so 10 to 18 inches. What else? Let's go for a depleted matrix. Let's see what it tells us. 5. Give me a depleted matrix, somebody. 10YR. 10YR, what? 6-1. Excellent. 100%.
What you're doing there is not correct for soil descriptions, though. Because if you have a different matrix color, you're going to have a new layer.
You can have a couple colors of matrix in the same layer.
Change the layers.
This is exactly what we're trying to see how it happens. And actually, no, it could be mixed in that layer. It happens. And so it's like, it's just what are the predominant colors, and you know, and it's not necessarily, they're not redox. So I mean, it happens. So
looking at it as like the matrix being the dominant color,
right.
You would in your remarks say inclusions of, you know, whatever, if it's a disturbed soil, you have other.
Yeah, there's definitely different ways to describe the soil or to account for what you're looking at. But you know, and I've seen it's not real, right? But I mean, there's soil scientists in here. Back me up. I mean, you can have multiple colors.
Soil science.
Okay.
When the change in color or texture results in a new layer. Because you
Right.
could have multiple redox colors in the same layer.
Right, but you can have the same, you can have multiple colors of the matrix in the same layer. And I'm not, I mean, I'm married to a soil scientist, but I'm not one, so I'm not gonna, you know, have it, but that's, I know that it happens, and I can't describe, you know, with others, I mean, it happens. So, let me just, we're just trying to see if we can break it, and I would say, though, that those colors, I think.
Just put the texture in there.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Barbara. Okay, so texture, we'll call it, let's see, clayey. That, and same there. Don't have any redox. Da-da-da.
Oh, it
Do.
checked.
So we have, and it checked them. Okay.
If you put the repeated depths into that second box, does it do anything then?
Let's
Like you
see.
repeat 0 to 10?
0 to 10. 0 to 10 is also that much. Oh, interesting. Downward from the top. Please do not enter any additional. Please verify that the starting depth from this layer matches the ending depth of the layer above. Okay. Interesting. Well, I mean, there's, little things, okay, it's like, oh, okay, well, I guess we don't want that on there. And it's still the same matrix, so, actually, let me give me that error again. There was something I remembered, and I think I saw a hand, but let me think of, no, it's not giving it to me again now. I want you to give me the error. Oh, well.
Repeat the sentence.
You guys are so smart. All right. Oh. Okay, starting depth. This reminded me of just another piece that's like nothing to do with really data sheets. This is observations in the field. And remember I brought up A11 and A12? So, and the difference between the two, well, A11, A12 has more specifics of what the layers above their requirements, but it's at that 12-inch difference of where the depleted matrix starts. So for A11, if the depleted matrix starts within 12 inches, it's A11. If the depleted matrix starts below 12 inches, it's A12. At 12 inches, what I would recommend, if you're in that position, write 11.5 or 12.5. And I'm serious about this. I mean, we're trying, you're looking, it's like, okay, now, if it meets one or the other, what's really the difference, okay? It's not that big of a deal. It's a hydric soil either way if you're going to check it, okay? But if we're trying to get the science right, I mean, really, like, and when you're measuring it, is it possible that it's a ½ inch different anyway? It's not really exactly at 12 inches. So just, keep that in mind. And if we start using centimeters, that will help us a lot more because we'll be a little bit more detailed with that and where that goes. Being one of the only 2 countries in the world, I think, that still doesn't use metric. Yes?
Well, that's more we're talking about the mixed matrix.
Mixed matrix?
Yeah, like when you have multiple colors
Right.
as the matrix.
Right.
And construction soils is the thing that keeps in my mind, is a lot of times you'll get 3 mixed colors, but not one of them is a redox color, it's just messed up.
Right. And some, I mean, like, some of these could be, I mean, is it stratified layers? Or is it, are there other things that you're seeing in your soil or that you're describing that would actually be an indicator that isn't automated? So there may be, some other pieces of information, but it's just kind of cool to see how it works. I think, like I said, I think it's going to work really well for the most part. Let's see, I think there was one other, no,
Can you just change the layer to 12 and see what it, as the sheet thinks it should be?
oh yeah, yeah. Yeah, I know, God. Working on it, 12 to 18, no, let's say 12 to 20, so we give it a deep enough, thick enough layer. Oh, 11, okay, which is why, I mean, this would be, well, it'd be interesting to say, because what I've always said, and this is the point, I mean, you could just say 11.5 or 12.5, write it down, there's no question. And the way you look at the definitions, at 12 inches is within 12 inches, so that's A11. So I mean, if your depleted matrix starts at 12, but like if you're writing down 12, are you in your mind saying it starts at 12, or are you saying it starts below 12? Again, it's between 1 or 2 indicators. It's there. See, A12 actually has a couple more requirements, morphological requirements in the layers above the depleted matrix, and that's why you do, it may not meet A12 if it's, a particular decision. So if this is then, let's see, let's try to see if it does this. 0 to 25. Oops. 25. Come on. That's going to be fun, isn't it? I didn't get it. Now that could be because of that 3-2. Because that's one of the morphological requirements for A12. It actually has to be a chroma of less than 2.
If you switch the 1640? If you switch the 1640 percentages, which one is dominant?
So I think it's, again, any matrix, any colors above the depleted matrix. So it'll probably be those little kinds of things. What else? Give me something else to try. What do you think?
You put in the comment area for that second horizon, E horizon not caused by reduction, and see if that changes the conclusion.
Here?
Yep.
Well, changes it. Whoops. Not caused by reduction. Yeah, and I would imagine that the remarks are probably not part of the automation to, you know, help make a call.
Can you override the conclusion that you got a high-grade soil?
Yes. Oh, what are you doing? You, as a professional, what did you do here? I am just, we are saying yes. I mean, you can overwrite. You can overwrite on this and put in there what your decisions are. And then I would suggest that if none of these, I mean, now you would want to check other, you know, in this case. You would need to check other and then explain in remarks, just like it says that there. Okay? The other thing, and we'll go back to the front page, which is, and I indicated, I mean, there's a bunch that's automated, but we had thought, you know, like, allow time to go through a little bit of discussion of normal circumstances, and then if there's any other questions that people have going into this preseason, you know, and who knows how soon, we're going to be probably getting out in the field pretty darn soon. One of the things to keep in mind is that concept of normal circumstances, that nothing's automated here. So, I mean, even if you were to check that, yes, the vegetation, I don't think anyway, they didn't indicate that. So yes, the vegetation is significantly disturbed, but that didn't do anything. It didn't automatically say normal circumstances are not there. So it's still the opportunity for you, I mean, you as a scientist still need to consider that and decide, okay? So that's just to highlight that it's, you know, not everything is automated, but I think a lot of it is going to be very good. I think helping to not miss indicators, you know, maybe something you didn't realize was that's actually an indicator, you know, it'll get checked off with whatever you input into the form. Okay? Maybe I shouldn't turn that off just in case. But I apologize, in my trying to figure this out, I did turn off the PowerPoint, so I'm going to turn it back on. I think I should probably turn that off so that I can now actually get to the PowerPoint. Of them, so thanks, bear with me. So, are there any, while we're waiting for that to just reload, we can talk about that particular topic. Is there anything just in general that you have thoughts about for, you know, you've either run into issues with review or something along those lines? I see your hand wanting to go up. Yes?
I've heard conflicting opinions of what we should put under the NWI classification space. Any words of advice? No, I mean, we have, you know, really very well updated NWI here in Minnesota. So if you can get to the polygon that's, you know, what they have there and you know, put that in, but. Well, I've heard some people want you to enter what you're actually classifying the wetland as, the wetland type.
As opposed to
what it's mapped as on the NWI.
Oh, fair question. I want to see what it is. I don't want to know what it's mapped as, because it could be mapped incorrectly.
Okay.
I mean, maps are done from like way high up in the air, basically. You know, I mean, kind of looking at, you know, and they're very well done. Yeah, absolutely, but there could be mistakes.
So it should match what's in your report.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, that's what we want to see. What is it? Oh, there's Lincoln again. Gosh, he's so cute.
Is that for the data form you're talking about?
Yes, on the data form, there's the one block on the top which asks for NWI classification. So that would be just, you know, what the question was, what do we want to see on there? And that would be
We want to see what the wetland is. You were the one out there, because you're actually sort of, you know, you may be sort of checking.
And is that at that particular point, or is that the wetland basin that you delineate?
Oh, it depends on how you're classifying it, exactly. I mean, you might be standing in something that's actually a PEMA, but the whole rest of it is, you know, PEMC, you know, it depends. What's the purpose of your delineation? You know, is it because an impact will be going into the inner part of that basin? Or, you know, it's a fair question, and there is no one, you know, right answer. It really just depends on, you know, what it is that you're identifying. And you can always do, you know, PSS/PEM. You know, you can definitely have a complex. And that's kind of like, that's not the kind of information that's going to kick your delineation out and send it back and say, try again. I mean, that's just good, you know, extra information so we know what's being reviewed. Okay, try this again. All right. Any other questions before we start? Yes,
Would
Mark?
the same go for the soil? Because there's a spot for the soil. You want what was mapped, or what we're seeing?
Well, that's a fair, I mean, I think what would normally be done, because again, I'm not a soil scientist, and I'm not going to stand there and say that I think this is exactly what the OSD says it is. I mean, I don't have that expertise. In that case, I'm going to put it is mapped as. You know, that's the mapping. And the mapping then, if you're putting the information in there, the mapping, the report that needs to be in the wetland report is, it lists the hydric soil components. So even if it's a predominantly non-hydric soil, if 3% of it is hydric, don't just tell me 3% of it is hydric. I want the report from the web soil survey that says 3% of it might be hydric. You know, the percentage doesn't necessarily mean anything. It just means that some of it you may have in swales or drainage ways or flats, you may have a hydric soil. So that's the information, because it's like, oh really? So even though it's a predominantly non-hydric soil, you mean that swale that's running through it, look, that has all those signatures on the photos? That might be wetland. So that's one of the things that we're looking at. Any other questions before we go into normal circumstances? And we have a good time. Maybe more questions will come up anyway. So let's just try this for fun. I've never really done this. I kind of pulled it together, you know, based on other, of course we teach this in basic delineation. It's a concept that we need to understand, and sometimes it's hard to understand. So what I basically say, normal circumstances are the conditions that would exist if humans hadn't messed with them. I mean, that's really the bottom line. And I'll go through a few examples and try to go with it. So it's like if you have a natural, you know, you have a pothole that's dry, well, potholes often go dry in you know, the drier end of the potholes. That doesn't mean that because the hydrology is missing, that it's not normal circumstances. That's normal for that particular resource. So I'm just going to run through kind of the concepts. And, you know, if there's questions, maybe, you know, maybe some thoughts will come up or examples that you have. And the examples, I mean, they run the gamut. I mean, every single site is different, and you have to just kind of look at it and consider it, you know, with what you have. So, first of all, you're just determining if one or more of the parameters is missing or obscured because of a disturbance. Okay, and the disturbance could be a huge flood that caused a river to re-meander. So I get it, sometimes it's not necessarily humans that do it, but ultimately it's almost always humans that do it. So just keep that in mind. Because I even look at, okay, the river meandering, well, we probably did something upstream that really made it catastrophic, and so we did cause the river to re-meander anyway. Okay. Getting back to, so where does this come from in the first place? It's part of our wetland definition. It's that, you know, under normal circumstances, a site will support the prevalence of hydrophytic vegetation, you know, vegetation that is suited to having saturated soil conditions. The reason it came up is because, you know, before we did a lot of this, so, and I actually have a picture of it later in the presentation, but so the Clean Water Act came, you know, 1972. It was just, We've been working since that time, essentially trying to protect our aquatic resources. It's evolved over time, of course. But when did the first delineation manual come out? 1987. So 1972 to 87, there were no manuals. There was just, folks going out and trying to, find and regulate wetlands. And people figuring out what those were. And then people who were savvy figuring out, well, they were looking for typical plants that lived in wetlands. Well, they would remove those plants and say, you don't have a wetland. You don't have any plants here that are a wetland. And so the definition eventually that was put out had that in there to account for just trying to capture those concepts. That's under normal circumstances. Again, where we weren't messing with it, I mean, whatever the wetland would do, left to its own devices is kind of how I look at it. So just another, I want to separate just a couple points here. So normal environmental conditions are different than normal circumstances. You may not hear that phrase an awful lot, but occasionally you will. NRCS uses it. That normal environmental conditions are essentially what you would expect to have for the climate for that time of year. That's what that is. So, are the climatic conditions, are they typical for this time of year? So that's one of the reasons we look at antecedent and try to figure that out. That's what we're looking for. And then normal circumstances, then we have a bigger question to look for. So again, short term. Normal environmental conditions is essentially the climate, which is far too short term to have any long-term effect on any particular site. So the normal circumstances are trying to get into looking at that, basically the permanence, the permanence test, years long, multiple years, and decades long condition of the site. So yes, we have to answer the question. The reason is, if normal circumstances exist, you just collect your data based on what's out there given. Boom, you dig a few pits, collect your veg data, note your hydrology indicators, and you're done. If the answer is no, it's because one of the parameters is missing, and you can't make the call based on what is out there now, because normal circumstances don't exist. So the whole point is you have to use other data to make your call. You have to use other data to make the decision. The most common case is agricultural fields. The vegetation is removed, manicured, managed, herbicided, everything that is done to make a certain plant species grow on that site. Heavily manipulated. So we have to look at other information. That's why the off-site, the aerial photography review was developed, to try to look at something that over many years you could try to determine what is the case on that particular site. So we have a key. It's actually provided in our delineation guidance. So it's one of the appendices in the guidance that's available, our joint guidance, and that's available on our website, the St. Paul District website. So if the soils and veg are undisturbed, or all three parameters are undisturbed, you have normal circumstances. So that's easy. Then using our dichotomous key, we can get through there. So there has been a disturbance. Well, the physical alterations are not so sufficient to remove the parameters or make it difficult for you to make your call. You can actually still determine that to be normal circumstances. So, I mean, it really is, it's just like, it's a balance, it's a decision that you're making for how much information you need to look elsewhere for to make your decision. So then certainly if the physical alterations are so significant that you can't figure one or more of them out, you do not necessarily have normal circumstances, and you have to go to a few other things to decide. And I think it's the examples that help the most. So you may have a brand new housing development go in, and next door you're going to do a delineation. Well, the housing development was permitted, okay? It may be messed up at the moment near the delineation, but it's actually now the new normal because it was permitted. Okay, so that's like, sometimes it gets you, how can I say this? When you're doing your delineation, if it's disturbed, then it may not be the normal circumstances at that moment, but it doesn't mean it's a violation, is I guess what I'm trying to get at. Okay, it's not always those issues. So then any of the physical alterations, there's a number of examples. Illegal activity, of course, that's kind of the easy one. Total or partial clearing of the vegetation, or selective removal of any particular vegetation, a crop, a tree farm, anything where humans are telling that spot what to grow, that's generally not the normal circumstances. because it's not leaving, you know, nature to her own devices. So that's kind of what it is. I like this particular graphic because it kind of helps to put it into perspective. It sometimes isn't a clear and easy yes or no. And that's why, you know, I know that that's why it still brings up questions and people aren't sure whether the normal circumstances are there. Really, all I really want you to get out of it is it messed up enough that you have to look elsewhere for the information to put your decision together? That's what it is. You can't just make the call based on what you saw on that one site. So if the disturbances are, you know, they're not so bad that you can't make the call, but yeah, the dirt might be, you know, pushed up a little bit, or there might be a rut through it, or something, I don't know, you know, so you might see a disturbance, but you can still make the call. And you can still make the decision on where the wetland line is. And then as the degree of disturbance increases, then so does, it like shifts out into, okay, absolutely, we do not have normal circumstances. So I think that's actually kind of a good graphic to get a view of what that is. So the full range of pristine to highly disturbed can be the normal circumstances. Yes, it can be disturbed, but it can be normal circumstances. And that's why it's like, God, what does it mean? All right, hopefully the examples will help. It is the long-term condition of the site. That's kind of one of the key pieces of it. What is the long-term, you know, essentially going to be the long-term condition of the site? Extent and duration and relative permanence. That's one test. Relative permanence. Yes?
Quick question. Agricultural land has been farmed for 40 years.
Right.
Nothing has changed.
Right.
Isn't that a long-term condition?
Nope, because a farmer could walk away and stop farming it that
But
day.
at the moment that you're there,
It's
he's
not
still
the normal
farming.
circumstances.
So wouldn't it be a normal circumstance?
It would not be the normal circumstances because the farmer could that day walk away and not plant it anymore. So he has disturbed, that's the vegetation one. That's a fair question, we hear it a lot. I mean, but it's the vegetation. Every single year, the farmers do what they do to make certain plants grow and not others. Not the normal circumstance.
But drain tile could be not a normal circumstance
Yes.
for.
Yeah, absolutely. A legally installed drain tile can be normal circumstances. It also doesn't mean that the wetland is fully drained, but it could be the normal circumstances to be partially drained. So yes, it can be the normal circumstance.
How about Phil Place 40 years ago?
Phil Place 40 years ago, is that before 72? I have to do my math.
Let's say
yeah, exactly.
1965. Yeah.
Exactly. No, that's the normal circumstance. Extent and normal, you know, and again, if it was done before the Clean Water Act, didn't need a permit, that's the normal circumstance. Maintenance is a factor. So for example, if that drain tile is not maintained or a ditch is abandoned and the wetland allowed to return, that becomes the normal circumstance. Now, you know, again, okay, was it last year or was it 10 years ago? I mean, there's all these little details. If you're going to work with someone that happens to have that issue on their property, well, you know, work with the folks, work with the regulators and kind of, you know, to do it. But that's the concept. You have to keep maintaining these alterations if you want to keep it as the normal circumstances. So it really is because it's the vegetation that kind of, you know, initially started the review of this concept of normal circumstances. We're really looking for what the soils and hydrology are, and really what the hydrology is, because that's what drives wetlands. So if you were to walk away from a site and there's enough hydrology there that it would, on its own, support hydrophytes, then that's what you're looking at, is what would drive the site. So again, that concept of extent and relative permanence of the whatever alteration it was. Okay, so I mean, there's a list here. So if something happened before the Clean Water Act, didn't need a permit, yes, and it's still there, it's still maintained, you're good to go. Authorized or didn't require authorization. Those are now normal circumstances. The hydrologic modifications we put in there, as long as they were put in legally and maintained, those become the long term. And you know, again, just because a ditch is there, I'm just going to say it, it doesn't mean the wetland is fully drained. It may just be partially drained. And then a site with undisturbed conditions.
that right there, I mean, if it's undisturbed conditions, then we know it's the normal circumstances. It's not been disturbed, and we just have to kind of look at what is there. So now we can start going into some of the examples. So fill, I mean, this is very clearly it's recent fill. You can tell it's recent fill. And the two plots are, I mean, when you're looking at the extent, the plot over on the left side, I mean, that's clearly not normal circumstances. I mean, we've got a few feet of fill. You could not make the call for what the soils are on that site. I would still contend that we have an issue on the plot on the right. We'd have to look at it. It depends on how deep it is. Is it 6 inches of fill? Well, what we'd be 6 inches kind of overtopping the normal way. You could still make the call. You could still probably dig through that little bit of fill and see what soil is underneath it. Within a few feet, you could see what the vegetation most likely was. In a case like this, though, what really matters is where was the original end of that wetland? And we know it's somewhere under this fill. So that would now require, that's what matters. That's not the normal circumstances. We now have to go back and look at the aerial photography and see what we can to determine, put together the picture of where the wetland used to be, the edge of the wetland used to be there. So, yep, recent fill covers everything. That's definitely not the normal circumstances. So just quickly, I'm going to go through these because I want to get to more examples. So hydrology, you have a drainage ditch. And you have a ditch that's been there since the 50s. That is the normal circumstances. Partially drained is the normal circumstance for that particular basin. Example B, a ditch constructed last year with side cast, the spoils just side cast into the wetlands. That's not the normal circumstance. You now have a disturbance that requires you to look elsewhere for how big that wetland is. Authorized fill meets the extent and relative permanence. Okay, a house is relatively permanent. And it is actually, it was permitted, so it's allowed, and so that this would now become the new normal. If you were, for some reason, required to go out and do a delineation where the soil is disturbed there, well, I mean, technically, that's not the normal circumstances for that wetland, but why would you do that in this case? I mean, we already did the wetland delineation, we got the permit, we put the house in. So this was just an example to show that how we establish a new normal. So you may look at aerials and say, well, there was never a house there. Well, yeah, but it's permanent. It's fine. Okay, normal plowing generally does not mean that the soils are completely disturbed. So you can still often see, especially A11, A12 in our area, you can still make the call. So just normal plowing generally is not like a significant disturbance. Deep ripping and some serious bulldozing of the soil that would strip the topsoil or anything else that would really eliminate your ability to make the call on the soil there would be not the normal circumstances. Okay? Saying, okay, vegetation, it's usually the removal of vegetation. This is the management. This is when you're looking at this is when you're looking at the aerial photography, and year after year you would see some signature probably in that spot right there. Some years, stronger than others. But when the vegetation has been removed, you are looking for what the soils and hydrology would normally be for that site.
Say you're out on site, your comment to ignore the planted crop with the data sheet. Do you not want us to write that corn is growing there then, or should we still say corn, but it's a disturbed vegetation?
Actually, I think that's a holdover from kind of how when we say, without regard to vegetation. That was how we used to interpret like the normal circumstances. We consider it without regard to vegetation. Well, to answer your question, I want to know that it's a planted corn crop. And your remarks, you'll say stressed or whatever. I mean, if you ever went to court and hadn't documented that that was there for some reason, it's like, why didn't you document it? So absolutely, you always document what you observe. As far as, I saw that on there, and I was kind of flipping through, and the point is of that statement is you're really looking at what the soils and hydrology are. So if you have hydric soil and the hydrology for that site would be based on your review of the aerial photography, then, and if you have both, then that's why you're ignoring, you don't say no, well, you do say no, hydrophytic vegetation is not growing there because it's not. Again, you're not going to go to court and say you had hydrophytic vegetation.
But you're going to note, in the remarks that it's stressed corn and it is not normal circumstances because it was a managed plant community. Yes?
Quick question, for the upland point, would
Yep.
you also want us to check not normal circumstances in this situation because the crops?
Yes. Yes, because again, the concept is humans have manipulated the site. So you have to do something else to figure out what the site should be. Because how do you know where the edge of the wetland is? How do you know that's your upland plot yet? Okay. So now here's where, it kind of gets to somewhat like the extent. Certainly, if it's overgrazed to this extent, you don't have any vegetation, then you don't have the normal circumstances. It's going to be really hard to make the call in this site, on this site. Pretty hard to make the call when the cows are roaming around too. But on this site again, they're grazing this, but it's lightly grazed. So you can still get in there and see and make the call on the vegetation. So again, it's kind of a continuum for you to decide. I mean, you could say it's an unimproved pasture. I mean, yeah, it's a pasture. Note that it is. Yet, if you can make the call and you can make your decision for where the edge of the wetland is, go for it. This next slide, I did it again. Okay, next slide then shows, again, that continuum, just using grazing as an example. I mean, really, if it's so lightly grazed that you can go out there and make the call, no worries. It is normal circumstances. But if it's messed up beyond where you can, consider, and then so that moderate grazing right there, that's where you make the call. And you're going to look at whether or not, this is where you use Chapter 5 of the supplements because they're actually list out, especially for the Midwest supplement, they list out those plants that are the increasers and decreasers. Basically, cows eat what they like to eat, and they don't eat what they don't want to eat. So there's going to be plants that will definitely, take over in an area that wouldn't necessarily be the case if cows weren't there eating them. So and there's specific species of plants that are listed in that. Problem areas, I already mentioned this, prairie potholes, for example, vernal pools, wicked big puddles. The same thing, I mean, they're naturally dry outside of the early part of the growing season. So that is the normal circumstances for them. There's no disturbance there. It's just a little wetland that is no longer wet. Same thing for these potholes and, for example, at drought time. So if we have a drought year, this pothole is actually so PMC, you would have, at least a foot of water normally, in most years, but it's been a drought. And so if you, for some reason, are doing a delineation around this, you would be saying it's naturally problematic. Potholes anyway are one of those groups of wetlands that, kind of make it harder for us to figure out where the edge is. But normal circumstances are present. You just have to indicate that for that period of time, it's during a drought that you're looking at. So I just want to point out, because that's where, the question came up then, it's like, yeah, but farm fields, they've been doing that for years, and those are exempt, or you don't have to do that. And it's like, we bring those little pieces up because you run into them, but it doesn't change the science of wetland delineation. Those are things kind of to think about later or after considerations. We really just want to, for the science, determine where the edge of the wetland is. That's all that matters. We want to know where the edge of the wetland is and the aquatic resources, if there's any streams or other resources that are in there. And it's only after that we worry about whether or not, or how we're going to regulate it, or if we're going to regulate it. So it's really, the bottom line is, just for the science, normal circumstances is the vegetation that's adapted to the soils and hydrology of the site. That's what we're looking for. So I'm going to run through a few examples and we'll just kind of see what people think. So is that the normal circumstances? You can see it's all cattails in the front, or maybe it's frag, but either way, it's a wetland. Is that the normal circumstances? I'm seeing shaking heads now. You would think that dumping a bunch of wetland, soil on top. I would want to say no right away. But then there's always that, yeah, but maybe it was permitted. Maybe they're actually filling because they have a permit. Okay, so, all right. So I got you thinking there. So, right away, is it or is it not? This is something you might see an awful lot. That's water. There's like a lake you can sort of see in the background. So I don't know. It's you're delineating the Minnetonka. You have a lawn that you need to delineate at the edge of Lake Minnetonka. Is this the normal circumstances? Anybody? Okay.
The plants are still there, it's just the tops are.
Right, right. So the answer is like, I'm seeing, yeah, it's like, okay, fair enough, because yes, the plants are still there, but did you come out right after they mowed them? And you can't make the call? Like you really don't know what they are? Well, that would be like, that's a managed plant community. Humans have kind of messed it up, so you can't make the call. So in this case, you're really looking for the soils and hydrology on this one. And I would typically say, I mean, if you are delineating a lawn, a Kentucky bluegrass lawn at the edge of Lake Minnetonka or any of the other lakes that we have around, I would suspect that it's not the normal circumstances because they've been herbiciding them. They've been doing everything they can to put whatever inputs to have the beautiful green lawn up to the lake edge. So just keep that in mind. If you're able to make the call, if you can see that it's actually all sedges and not Kentucky bluegrass, well then you can go ahead and delineate and not worry about whether it's normal circumstances. New boardwalk through the wetland. Is this the normal circumstances? Could you make the decision about where the wetland line is for this particular site?
Yeah.
Yes, yes. And in fact, this, I mean, yeah, there might have been just a tiny bit of disturbance for that, the form to go in, but, hopefully they did it right, and it's really not, it doesn't really have the effective fill. So, other than that. So I would say, no, just for example, yeah, you have a boardwalk through there, and it's, might be a disturbance, but you can make the call here. As a golfer, I'm kind of sad to see a lot of golf courses going under and being changed into developments. And so I know that people are doing golf course delineations. Normal circumstances?
Permit.
I think I would want to hear a resounding no. Yes, it may have been permitted. Yes, it's the normal circumstances for now. It's not the normal circumstances because golf courses manipulate the plant community regularly. So you know that they're putting in herbicides, you know that they're mowing it, you know that, so I mean, if you are doing a delineation, it will be very difficult to find the line in this particular site. So golf courses, for the most part, I would say not normal circumstances. Yeah, but. There's always going to be yeah buts, and that's okay. And one of the things that I want to just make a comment about is if you say one way or the other, I mean, if it's really obvious that it's an ag field and you say normal circumstances are present, that's when I'm going to have a problem. When it's a site that I'm not really sure, or you can even write in your remarks, I'm not sure if normal circumstances are present. But then make sure that you're looking at everything you can possibly look at to make your final decision. Okay? Because you're going to want to just cover any questions that we might have. How about that? Is that the normal circumstances? Well, again, okay, this is right after a tornado, and there's a lot of crap in the wetland, but I kind of think you could probably make the call at the end. Where the wetland line is. I guess it would depend on okay, maybe all this stuff is laying on the edge of your wetland line. Well then, no, normal circumstances are not there. I have to move an awful lot of house pieces or something. So, yeah, okay, extreme, yes, I know. All right, this is very typical. Resounding? No, that's a wetland. That's a wetland up in the Red River Valley. And the reason I know it's a wetland is because you can see you have some drainage patterns. You have, you can see the veg, or at least the refuse of the veg, the detritus, and then it's not in there so that would be, yes, that is remarkable. Very much not the normal circumstances. How about this wooded swamp up in northern Minnesota? Normal circumstances, yay, early season, pretty soon we'll see that. Okay.
I just like to finish with this one because, in particular, lately, regulations are kind of going under fire, and there are certainly some regulations that are pretty important that have done our country some good. So this is the Cuyahoga River in Ohio, the poster child for the Clean Water Act. I think June of 1969, it had been on fire how many times? So by the time, this came along. So, so I some regulations, okay, maybe we need to look at some, but the Clean Water Act is one that's I wouldn't want to walk away from. So that's my presentation. Look at that, I pulled this right at the 4:30. So you got all of your stuff, all your credits. Any other questions? I mean, I'll be around kind of closing up here if there's any other thoughts or questions people have. And like I said, we'll get the notice out about those automated data forms when they come out, and look forward to seeing somebody out in the field maybe this season. Thanks again.